With 18, I always had the goal, like with 29, I will be a millionaire. And I just realized over time it's way harder than I thought.
Hey, this is Bjorn, and this is the Blindfeed podcast, your no bullshit guide to meaningful work. We openly talk to people who do remarkable work and who found interesting ways to better understand themselves and the people they work with.
In today's episode, we speak with Markus Müller, the former head of product at N26 and who is now in the product team at Flash, one of the hottest urban mobility startups in Europe. With Markus, we talk about how to create people-first organizations, the lessons of his failures, what good and bad leadership looks like, and why reflection should be at the heart of your career. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Well, Markus, welcome to the Blindfeed podcast, and thank you so much for joining us. We already had like a conversation, so we like artificially are putting this in now to like get started. Yeah, can you give a bit of an intro to the people who are listening, to kind of give a story like where you come from, how you ended up here in Berlin, and how you're now leading the product at Flash?
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm from Austria, the southern part, very close to Italy actually. I started when I was 18 with my first, small company, basically as a freelancer, building websites and designing websites for small companies. Since then, I spent 6-7 years only to be self-employed. I have done this for a couple of years, also during university. I moved to Vienna to study business, and while studying business, I opened up a restaurant together with 3 friends, and we developed our own tablet-based menus for restaurants and the point of sale system for the restaurant. And we had a quite nice upper class restaurant in the city center of Vienna, all that while studying. So that was a very, very intense time. We ran the restaurant for 2 years. Was super difficult to...
You ran the restaurant
yourself?
Yeah,
we ran the restaurants. Wow. I've been working 40-50 hours a week in a restaurant and managing a restaurant, and then sometimes sleeping at university. But it was very exciting. I learned a lot about entrepreneurship, and we had 12 employees, and it was an exciting time. But then we figured out we don't want to stay in this industry. It was just not rewarding, no scalability effect or anything. So after 1.5 years, we decided we wanted to sell the restaurant. We figured our way out of this industry. After 2 years, we sold the restaurant. We're able to pay back all the loans and credits and
that's already
stuff.
a relief, so right? At the day.
That was good because we took almost 400,000 euros in debt or investment actually into the thing, all on our own risk, with 22 or so. So it was quite a first intense experience, but actually led to the point that I'm totally relaxed with so many things today, because this was so intense that probably I will never have such an intense time again. And then I focused on finishing things. So I finished university, I closed my own website agency type of thing. And then I decided to move to Berlin, and that was 2014. First did an internship in venture capital for a couple of months, and learned that this is absolutely not the thing I want to do, because from being an entrepreneur, I suddenly ended up being an analyst, doing sitting in front of a computer whole day and just
watching pitch decks.
Yeah, I'm not doing no action actually. And then I wanted to start my own company again, but I stumbled upon a company called Number 26 back then by accident actually. And a friend pulled me in and said, "Hey, Markus, come join us." We had dinner with the founders, and it was 2 months before they even launched. And somehow I said, okay, let's give it a try. I gave it a try, 3 months to do basically a founder assistant. I did it for the first month, and then I was super excited about being there. And I got lucky because the head of product and the CTO left a month after the launch. So 1.5 months after I joined. And I worked from the first day on with the product team. Because I've also led the product development in our restaurant business, the development of the point of sale system, etc. So I was pushed into the product team from beginning on, without really knowing what I'm doing there, but with having
that's
quite
how most
some
of us
background.
get started, right?
Yes. And then I had got the chance to take over the product management and rebuild the whole team, and that's what I spent my first year at N26 with, building the basic team. We got a lot of funding, and a lot of things turned out quite well. So we brought this niche finance app to a proper bank account in the first year, and the second year was about scaling the team from one product team to multiple product teams. I made a lot of mistakes in hiring, onboarding, people management. A lot of things went out also quite well. And then in the third year in N26, I spent a lot of time on professionalizing product management, like scaling up to 10 teams, 13 product managers. That was a very exciting time as well. Nonetheless, I decided to leave because my learning curve was flattening out. And I wanted to do something more entrepreneurial again. Our company had 400 employees, more than 100 people in product and tech. So I was hungry to do something like early stage again. So I left at the end of 2017. Experimented a lot in 2018 with like teaching at university, trying to get into autonomous driving, unsuccessfully. So we were not able to raise the funding which was required because we're a bit early in this market. Did an interim job in a health tech startup, and then stumbled upon the company called Flash. Got to know the founders, was super excited about their vision. And about their profiles, because I didn't consider joining a startup. But this was so exceptional from the people, from the vision, from the setup. I said, okay, like I'm happy to postpone my entrepreneurial plans for another couple of years and get started with them. So I joined them in November. I'm part of Flash now for 4.5 months and doing everything that is required to ship a product, to make our customers internally and externally happy and deliver upon our company goals. That's a high level.
So you've been part of some like exceptionally fast growing companies, right? N26 is, I think, very known, especially here in Europe, as one of the fast growing companies here. How are you experiencing it now? Because it seems like you are really into like the chaotic phase, right? You love that, like figuring it out, and like you said, like as soon as it gets a bit too stable, I feel like my learning curve sort of like flattens. Like, what about the chaos do you really find like sort of like meaning in?
I just like if there is a lot of energy in a room, people are just want to make things happen and don't spend time on like thinking, okay, how can I maximize my own power and how can I like influence more people and push things through just to be visible within the company. I just like this focus on getting things done and not standing inside of blocking each other's ways or things. And this is what I like about the early stage. I like chaos. I don't like chaos in a sense, but I like to structure chaos. I like if my flat is like super clean up, and I like if things are in order and structure, but I like to structure chaos. I don't like a structured phase where everything is, we have perfect processes and then just optimize a little bit. I'm not an optimizer. Even though I optimize a lot of things in my life, I'm not an optimizing company. I don't get
much energy from that.
I want maybe to kind of push things forward by a few 100% and not by 1% or 0.5% here. That's not what drives me. I want to feel that my activities have a lot of impact.
And when we're like talking before we actually start recording, we already talked a bit about like if you have a company that's in a really competitive space, it requires a certain mindset of people, right? If you see it now that all the attention is getting towards like tech and everybody says, I want to work for a startup, but like we also learned that, you know, some people are just not right for that moment at the initial phase and when chaos needs to be structured. Like what are the lessons that you've had to learn yourself that you think, oh wait, like you said, some bad hires, like what were the patterns that you find about this is when you should join an early company or that's in a competitive space or you shouldn't?
So I think one of the key things is adaptability. Like you need people who are adaptable and don't have a problem with permanent change, because in such a company, the organizational setup is changing all the time. And if you cannot deal with this, you're really not the right person to go in an early stage startup. And I've unfortunately hired also a couple of people who probably were not as adaptable as they had to be successful in a company. In particular, when the founders are also very adaptable. And both N26, Flash, and even Vivi, where I've been for a couple of months in between, are highly adaptable companies, but also very result-oriented, which leads to sometimes a bit more tension in a company. So you need to find your way to how to work with this result-oriented type of organization, but still counterbalance it a little bit so it still stays a human and people environment. And some people tend to either get like drained or burn out by this result orientation because they over engineer it or like push themselves too hard. Some people just get like too harsh with other people because they cannot deal with the pressure and they pressure other people further. So you really need a strong inner balance to still stay calm and like even if the weirdest things happen, stay calm and focus. And I think there's a third aspect. It's like focus. You really need to understand where to focus because the number one reason why I think startups fail is because they do too many things at the same time. You need to really have a sharp focus and then execute towards that focus. That means like clear goals. That means understanding what you're not doing. Particularly in product management, that's very important to say like no is more valuable than yes actually. And managing the expectations around that. Summing it up, I think adaptability is key, and paired with that, a certain mindset of, if I quote Ray Dalio, open-mindedness and a low ego. Because other than that, you involve yourself way too much into political discussions and how can I maximize
how can I look good?
How can I be best in the org chart in 1 year? If people spend time with this, you lose focus, and then the company actually won't be successful.
And for example, when it comes to like adaptability, right? I think every person, when they think first for themselves, think I'm very adaptable. I can deal with change because it's kind of like a virtue people want to associate themselves with, right? Like what are things that you found helpful for yourself that people can sort of like really look in the mirror and say, okay, maybe you're not, you're adaptable to some extent. We're all adaptable to some extent, but you're not that adaptable that's required to actually, enter such a crazy growth company.
It's a very good question. Like, how does adaptability manifest at the end of the day? I think one key aspect you can look at is like whenever you have a certain assumption or pre-assumption on something, and then you learn that something is different than you thought, how do you react? You start defending your own assumption and say, no, I think it's that way. I think we've always done it this way. And do you feel like being attacked, or are you very open with this and say, interesting opportunity, like interesting opinion. Let's discover this a bit. I think it might be different, but let's look at that. I think this comes with this open-mindedness as well. But the first thing is like, how do you react on things that are different than you would assume them or expect them? And how do you deal with that? And I see many people that like go in a defense mode or cannot deal with anything that is different than they would have expected or their opinion. And I think try to get a certain awareness for whenever you feel like that you now need to defend your opinion or your belief or your assumption, and look at like, how do you deal with this? Are you defending? Are you open? Do you question this? Do you try to understand this other opinion to learn how it might be better?
And is it something that you're in the team that you're with? Because like when you hire people can always kind of like fake it for a couple of interviews, right? And when there actually is tension and there's stress and there are deadlines involved, people kind of go back to their like normal self, right? How do you try to make people aware of that when you're seeing like, oh shit, like that is the start of being closed and being resisting to too much change?
I think it's a strong combination or like a strong factor of having certain trust and certain safety. So if people feel that they are safe in their environment and they can trust someone, they become more open for feedback and more open for criticism. If people are in fear and scared that like their position is on the edge or they are on the edge of the company, I think they start defending even more. So you kind of need to create somehow a little bit of trust with people first, and then be very harsh and direct and open with them.
And what are the things that you've done yourself to establish that?
I think it's first is listening. It's like listening to, or try to listen to what are problems people have and show that you care about them. Like building a certain empathy for people and show that you care about them. Support them and help them and really show them that you're interested in their own performance, in them, so that they will get better. You don't criticize them because you want to be the smarter person in the room. You criticize them to help them to grow. And I think it's very hard to give direct feedback, in particular in our European culture, even harder in the Asian culture, I think. And now we're working also with founders that are very American, or one founder who is very, very direct, which is a good training, I would say, and pushes me, myself also to be even more direct and open. But I think most people appreciate actually very direct feedback. The problem is it's not easy to give hard feedback in a very direct way. You need to first obviously build a certain trust by building up a trust base in a conversation. Then you need to tell people this is not, you don't want to kind of attack them, you don't want to kind of make them look personal, bad, but it's more like you want to help them to grow, and this is your own perception, this is the way how you see it, and it might be completely wrong. So it's also about being vulnerable in front of others and telling them that you might be wrong. It's one of the best inputs I ever got from one of my managers in N26. He said, try to look for as many opportunities you can find to be vulnerable in front of as many people you can be. So instead, like, enjoy the moment when you stand in front of 200 people and can say, okay, I fucked it up, I've been wrong, this was my mistake, because then you are a true leader when you can say that. Because then people will see, okay, this person can be vulnerable, and so I can be. Or it's also fine if I'm wrong. So this is what I'm first trying to do. So I first ask for feedback myself and let them criticize, and then tell them, hey, this is how I see it. You can deal with it the way you want. I'm happy to help you to work on this because I want you to grow, and this will also help me to grow and help the company to grow. I think it's really the way how you package it. But you need a lot of, you could say, emotional intelligence or whatever, empathy to do that. And I think I've seen a lot of, particularly founders, that lack heavily this part of, or this skill, and does have big problems with leading people. And I've seen a lot of bad leaders and not many good leaders so far in my career.
So what are besides the part of vulnerability, like what are like for people to recognize what is a good leader to work for or with, right? I don't think you most of them work for somebody, you work with somebody. What are things that you find, like these are traits that you recognize this is probably a bad actor versus like a good actor?
First, I really believe in this term that maybe it's not in a very, very early stage, but as soon as you grow up as a company a little, people work for people and not for companies. So they work for or with their leader, and they are staying with the company because of their leader and not because of the company. As there's a certain extent that you're also associated with the brand and so on. So I believe it's very, very important to be a strong, like trying to work on leadership skills. And what is making a good leader? Like, I'm just trying to lead people the way how I want to be led by other people. And the first thing for me is that I want to have a lot of empowerment. I want to take my own decisions and own my mistakes and my success. Thus, I need clear goals. I need a clear guidance of what do we want to achieve, what's our focus. Because other than that, if I don't have clarity on what I need to focus on, I cannot deliver. So I first need, like, as a leader, I need to make clear, okay, what are my expectations? I need to understand the expectations of the person I lead, and then try to define clear goals and make these expectations very as obvious as I can, and then give them freedom and room to act in a certain space. So I create these boundaries and say, okay, this is your room to act, and if you cross these boundaries, come and consult me, and if you cross these boundaries, come and like let me be part of this decision. I think that's a very important one. And the second aspect is then like try more to coach people. Whenever you can help people improve, try to coach them. Whenever you criticize them, give them package it more as like, here is some advice how you can improve your work, how you improve yourself, and always say, hey, you can criticize and say this is okay, but you could do it way better. I think it's like this ambition to help people to really give them the feeling that you are interested in their personal growth. That's very important, I think so. Freedom, room, clear guidance and expectations in terms of what you want to achieve, and then coaching them along the way, so that they feel that they are not lost and they can always approach you whenever they have problems. And you will give them a piece of advice, or you will ask them 3 questions that will give them the next clue how to achieve their goals and solve the problems. That's what I would say was most important for me. And most people, most leaders fail in the first thing already. Like they don't have clear expectations. They don't even know their own expectations. And that's why most people fail right from the beginning on, because they don't talk about expectations.
And I remember like when you said, like when you started the restaurant, that was the moment where you said, I went through so much pressure and that like now I'm not really like fussed when something crazy happens, right? Like what in that experience made you like very self-aware about yourself?
I think it was on the one hand side, we were very naive. In terms, we thought, hey, we're gonna go into this, we want to start something. Like we were all like 21, 22, and we said we want to do something more than just studying. And we thought it's super easy. We open up a restaurant, and then maybe 3 weeks later, someone will come and buy the restaurant because it's such a cool restaurant. We thought the hard act about it is like opening the restaurant, but the hard thing is running it and making it successful. Like having totally different expectation and then hitting reality was the first eye-opener for all of us. Like I'm still very close with the 3 people I started this whole thing with. And it was an eye-opener because we just were not aware of what the reality actually looks like, of running a restaurant, of having daily operations, of struggling. And then the second aspect obviously was that we had a lot of financial risk, personal financial risk. Like I had literally no money and still like basically had 100,000 euro on my shoulders per person, which in this early career is super tough. And I wasn't really aware, I was too naive to deal with this whole thing. And then I realized, oh fuck, there's a lot of money in the game and I need to perform now. And then on the other side, you have a team and you have like a lot of problems with the team, and then you have good people, but you sometimes need to fire someone for financial reasons. So I remember like today, if I have to lay off someone, I'm super relaxed because I had so hard layoff talks in the restaurant time. I will never have such a difficult, tricky situation. So I'm relatively relaxed when I have to do that, if there is a good justification for it. So it's in each aspect, from people management to daily operations, like working 15 hours and then next morning, like getting up, going to university, being fully focused on this stuff, and then going to a restaurant again and continue working while other people party and enjoy their student life was very intense. I think I will never have such an intense time, dreaming about it all the time. And so it's the financial risk with the shock on reality and the tough work. So there was no pressure from outside. It was all the pressure actually from inside. There was no one, and that's why I somewhat also enjoyed it. There was no one telling us what we should do. We could do whatever we wanted because we were the owners, but we also felt this complete ownership. We said we are responsible
for this stuff. So when you say that, you know, it was like expectation hitting reality, right? And that you say like, I don't think I'm ever going to go through such an intense experience. It makes me wonder to what extent, for example, that is it like as you mature that you just get more chilled, or is it more like, okay, maybe my expectation of what I want to achieve are not as high, so my opportunity to like hit the reality that hard again is probably not going to happen?
I think first if before my level of stress and my level of biggest problem to smallest problem was on a scale from 1 to 10, now it's more the scale broadened up or widened up and says like now it's 1 to 50. Problem that used to be a 10 is today maybe still 10, but my scale will change. So it's you're getting a little more relaxed because I had a very tough experiences very early on, and I reflected a lot upon it with my colleagues and with other people. So I really went through a lot of time of reflecting on this and learning from it. That's one part, and I would say the second part is more around. In the beginning, I thought everything is so easy, and then at some point you realize, okay, everything is harder than you think initially. And I thought it's like building with 18. I always had the goal like with 29 I will be a millionaire. And I just realized over time it's way harder than I thought.
It looks so simple on paper, right? Where you imagine it's, that's possible.
I'm a very optimistic person, like very optimistic about everything in my life, which I think helps me. But I became a little more realist over time, which is, I think, good to be a bit more realist about the things. I still believe that you can make big things happen, and my ambition isn't any lower today than before. I think it's even higher. It's just I know the way to achieve all of the things is also not necessarily harder. I need to be just smarter on picking the right people, on picking the right path. So actually, I run a little bit slower, I would say. I'm more careful on deciding on what to do, because I realize if you jump into something too quickly, you might be stuck with it for 2 years, 3 years, and you don't even know the consequences. And this is why when last year I tried to start another company, I had a real big issue of deciding what to do, because I had this experience that last time I decided so quickly, basically overnight decided to do a restaurant without knowing what it means, and then ending up being stuck in 2 years in this industry, or 3 years actually, that I was so careful and thinking, okay, what industry do I want to go into, like exploring a lot. And maybe it's also a problem. I will figure it out the next time I try to start a company. So I'm more careful and and more thoughtful on what to do in particular in the decisions that have a lot of impact.
And how, for example, do you identify then sort of the gap of where you want to go versus where you are, and how do you translate into, okay, then these are things I need to work on for myself?
In what aspect? Do you mean like for life goals or short-term goals or mid-term goals?
I would say like longer term, right? So if you think like 2-3 years ahead, which I think, let's say in the startup world is quite long-term these days, like how do you then work your way back? So, okay, I actually want to be here, right? And I think it also is part of life, right? It could be you want a certain relationship, or you want to have certain wealth, or whatever that might mean for you. Like, how do you identify the gap, and what is a gap? Is a gap like skill? Is a gap more just like years of experience for you? Like, what are the things that help you identify that?
I think it's definitely a big part of it is the experience. And if in the past, a lot of people pushed me and said, hey, start your company early. It's cool that you started with 18 and with 21 and whatever. Looking back, I would say it's actually valuable to be part of working in a startup or company first and get some experience before jumping into it and start your own company. Yes, there are some stories of people with 21 like build Facebook or something. But I think this is not a normal case. I think your chance is way better if you have 5 or 10 years of somewhat professional experience and have gone with some company through some pain, not being like responsible firsthand and have experienced good and bad leadership. And I think you have a way better chance. And the key thing is that you need to be in an environment where there's a lot of people you can learn from. And not being in an environment. That's why I personally enjoy working more in startups, because everything accelerates way faster and you can also grow way faster in such an environment. So you have more change, you see more things in a shorter time. So I think it's really about spending your time with the right people, always pushing yourself forward to meet more interesting people, learn from them, exchange with them. And then reflect, spend a lot of time reflecting and thinking of what did I experience, what was good about it, and how can I improve? Because I have like an over-engineered concept of my life goals and yearly goals and all of these things. But I'm currently reading a book that is talking a lot about habits.
Yeah, and which one is that?
Atomic
Habits. Yeah, from James Clear.
And I'm almost done with it. And this changed a little bit my perspective on goals.
Yeah.
Because I'm like this completely crazy guy on life goals and everything. And actually, it's a fair point that they argue it's more about what's your identity and working 1% towards like every day on becoming more this person that you want to be. And I think it's true for companies as well. What is the identity of a company? What do you want to achieve? And then I think it's the small steps that accumulate and get you there. So I think you need a clear aspiration to inspire people, and in particular give them focus, and so that they can take decision what to do and what not to do. And I'm really a big fan of breaking down in a company vision to meaningful goals. I think so many companies have no clear goals. That's why people don't know what to prioritize and don't know what to do. And so I see companies spending not enough time on defining the right objectives and metrics, how to measure their success. So I think it's very, very important to have this vision and then have clear goals that you know what direction you run. But then achieving these goals is about your day-to-day habits or your day-to-day activities that you do in a company or also as an individual. And it's not just doing it, but also reflecting on what you do. And that's also something I noticed multiple times in my short career so far, is that I spend sometimes in this hectic, chaotic startup time, I don't spend enough time reflecting. I change something after a process after a year and then notice, it's so much easier once I've changed it. Why did I not do it like this way from beginning on? Why did I not spend like these 2 hours on thinking about the process, and now it's way easier? Because you're so much in the flow that you get blind for these things. So that's why in a startup environment you need some peers, mentors, mentees to help you reflect.
And how do you set that up then, for example, with the peers and the mentors? Because I think a lot of people struggle with this, right? To say, okay, just schedule out a couple of hours a week to say, just reflect off. Like, what would you recommend people doing, and what would be, for example, the type of questions you think are useful for people to help reflect?
So in N26, it helped me a lot to have a close friend being my first partner, or like close partner from beginning on. We started both very early, relatively junior. We grew with the company like crazy, and we were spending always when we have issues, we were spending an evening together to talk about these issues. So in this phase, the peer part helped me a lot, to be honest, more than the leadership part, because there was no, in the first like half a year or a year, I didn't have a clear leader. Like CEO was too busy to really be a leader. Then after 8 or 9 months, I had like actually a very strong leader who helped me, our CTO, who helped me a lot. And it was the first person who gave me really good feedback, like valuable feedback, which I could learn a lot from. So then in this phase, I had someone who, at least for a year, gave me some very concrete, clear guidance and feedback. And it was the first time I experienced something like mentorship a little bit. And today, I'm actually getting a lot of reflection out of teaching and mentoring and coaching young startups or entrepreneurs. So mainly through the university I'm teaching at. So the students ask me, hey, can you help me? I say, okay, let's go for lunch, and I give you some inputs. And I can just feel how much I reflect myself about the problems while I help them solve their own problems. So I think some people are very good when they reflect super well when they write down things. Some people are very good in reflecting while they talk with others.
Talking through,
and help other people solve similar problems they have faced, and then they start structuring this. And some people are better when probably, I don't know, meditating or just spending time for themselves and think about things. I have I do a little bit of writing, a little bit of thinking, but mostly I spend time talking to people and then reflecting while talking. So I experienced that in this phase, it helps me a lot to mentor other people. And I try to kind of, I don't know, have a mentor lunch every 2 weeks or so with different people. And I don't have that much of a peer. I think theory says you should always have a peer, a mentee, and a mentor, like these 3 people that help you reflect and learn and push. It's just hard to have all the 3 things in a perfect setup all the time.
And nobody ever says to you officially, I'm your mentor, right?
Yes. It's very hard to find a mentor. There's a lot of online platforms where you can find a mentor and so on. But do you, like these artificial mentors where these people get paid for that? I'm not sure that's the right thing.
Now, if I think, for example, if I also just look back for my own career, is that sometimes people are mentoring you without it's ever official, right?
Yes.
Is that the CEO is teaching you some lessons hard or the soft way or guiding without saying explicit, I'm your mentor. You're like, or you ask, like, can you be my mentor? No, like you go with a problem to a person and then they give you input back and you think, oh shit, actually it was helpful. Yeah. And then kind of you have a mentor experience.
It's a very good point actually, because if I look into like how some interns and junior people grow within companies, I think the people that grow the best are the ones who are not afraid to reach out to other people in the company, meet all the people for lunch, ask for feedback, approach everyone in the company for like input on their problems, and then eventually find someone in the company or two people that are particularly helpful for them, and then they reach out to them more regularly. Even if it's just 15 minutes a week, it can really help you a lot.
It doesn't even have to be official time locked, right? What
Yes.
I know, because especially if the companies are a bit bigger, like the executives don't have time for regular meetings and blocked stuff in their calendar, but they always have time for, hey, I have a problem, can you help me? And they take 5 minutes anytime you asked it.
And I think that's very important. So if you want to find a mentor, it can obviously be through going out and even figuring out who could be my mentor. But at the end, it's being also in a company environment where you have a few people and you have access to these people who are just way more experienced than you, and you can work with them. And they have a certain coaching mindset, at least like have an ambition to help you. And then they are, as you say, not officially your mentor, but they are willing to help you, and you need to get some stuff out of them. And I also experienced, and that's why I joined, for example, Flash, because I've seen like the founders have significantly more experience. They have done so many interesting things in their life compared to all the other founders I mostly meet. Other founders I meet, they're usually about some similar experience than I have. So I can learn some things from them, like with grouping up with or peering up with them and discussing, but these guys have a lot of interesting inputs and experience. I can feel this day to day, and that's good. I am feeling more like a junior suddenly again. Well, previously I felt like, okay, I'm probably now I grew up. I think sometimes even though you're very experienced, you need to feel like a junior. Then you feel that you're kind of learning.
But that's the growth mindset, right? Where you say, I want to be the student, right? I think it's a bit of, I don't know if it comes from Buddhism or it comes from the Kaizen approach, right? It's like always trying to be the student. If you become the teacher in everything, there's something wrong.
That's a good point,
So what are, for example, like for you, like the key things to say if people want to, like I remember you saying actually something about like clear goals versus meaningful goals, right? What would be like one sort of like takeaway you can give to people to say, okay, everybody knows clear goals, OKRs, like John Doerr saying all this shit and like get it up, it's going to change your life, put a key result here and there, but it doesn't mean they're meaningful, right? Like, so what would you, if you can have something to give away to people, like how can they turn it into a meaningful goal?
I have experienced in N26, we introduced OKRs and worked with that framework for 2.5-3 years. Went through a lot of challenges with it, and same at the other two companies I worked at, we were introducing it or working with it. So I've seen a lot of, like, it's such a simple framework, but people make so many things, like so many mistakes with it, and are not able to use it, over-engineer it, or don't understand it, and so on. So I think one of the key learnings for myself in this was, first, like making a goal needs to be simple to be understood, not super complicated. You need to, maybe first of all, you need to spend time, really enough time to define the goals. Most people just say, okay, we have half an hour, let's write down our goals and then let's like move on. That's not how it should work. I think management teams spend way too little time on really defining meaningful in the sense, where do you as a company want to go? What do you need to reach your next step? Mostly it's about reaching our next funding round, because other than that, we won't be around anymore. So when you close your Series A, for example, you already need to think of, okay, what do we need to deliver for our Series B in order to be able to raise that in 1.5 years? So how much money do we need in Series A to have all the resources being available so we can reach a Series B then. So, okay, saying what is our ultimate or the next big step or mission that we need to achieve, and what is the story that we need to tell at Series B to raise this money and to be able to continue in case you have a venture-backed startup. Like obviously a bit different if you are bootstrapped or family business. But in this case, it's about first the bigger context and then trying to understand, okay, what are the things that we need to show? Like is a certain traction with users, is there a certain revenue, and then deriving from this like goals that are relevant for more the next mission, like the 2 or 3 goals that you need to achieve for the next 1 or 1.5 years, and then really breaking this down and say, okay, what does this mean for the next quarter? And really making sure that they have relevance towards what you want to do, not just their goals because, we want to be seen as this type of company. That's why we define these goals. The second aspect is like really defining outcome-driven goals and not input or output-driven goals. I hate it when I see a goal like, I'll release feature X. Why do we do that? Like it's not meaningful. Like why do you even want to release this feature? Because there's some certain outcome that you want to achieve. So it's not about the feature, it's about the outcome that you want to achieve with this feature. Is it more conversion? Is it more
engagement or whatever?
Engagement, Or it's the same as like, you're also not saying like our goal is to print flyers or hand out 5,000 flyers. You want to convert 50 people and not hand out 5,000 flyers. So like having outcome-driven goals, it's so hard for many people to do that. They always define this input-output-driven goals.
Why do you think it's so hard for people? What have you seen where people struggle with it?
Because this is you see that people don't think about the outcomes enough. They just think about what is my input. Okay, I need to produce these flyers. I need to run 5 campaigns. But you don't run 5 campaigns. I don't care whether you run 5 or 10 or 15 campaigns. I want to have certain outcomes. So, and the problem with inputs is some factors might change and suddenly your input is not meaningful anymore. And then if you're a result-oriented person, you might stick to your input factors just because you want to deliver, while maybe they are not meaningful anymore for the outcome you want to achieve. So that's why if you want to be meaningful, you need to be outcome-focused, because maybe the actions that you drive might change in such an adaptable environment. So maybe this feature is not relevant anymore because you make a new learning and figure out no one cares about this aspect.
Or part of the product just switched off.
Yes, suddenly you cannot achieve your goals anymore because you figure out this feature is not meaningful. Then some people struggle and say, okay, should I actually continue this feature or building this product just because it's my goal? So that's what I mean with meaningful, like understanding what's the outcome you want to drive, because this opens up the solution space for you to discover different ways how to get there. And this, if you tell a team and say, hey, we want to improve conversion by 5%, you will have a lot of different optional ways how you can do that. If you tell a team, like, build a new referral system to do X, they will not even consider other options. You will probably not get any input how you could alternatively achieve this goal. That's why this switch, and I think our CEO at N26 was pushing a lot for that. Like first mental shift is from input driven to output driven, then from output to outcome driven. And I never understood in the beginning what he actually means with that, because he probably also read it somewhere and was not like explaining it, but he was pushing and insisting so much on this that it made me think about it and made me like understand, okay, that's what he actually means. And because I also fall back into like defining kick off this feature.
Like it's easy to think like that, right?
This is one big mistake. And the second one I see is like people define goals where at the end of the week, the month, the whatever, you cannot even say whether it's achieved or not, because it's so vaguely phrased that you cannot even say yes or no. Did I achieve it or not? I don't want to go into is it realistic or so on. It's always hard to say what's realistic, but find a way to phrase it that you can also measure it at the end. And it's putting yourself in the perspective of, let's say, if it's a quarterly goal, at the end of the quarter, and say, if I achieve, let's say, make up a certain exemplary outcome, say 50%. If you achieve 50%, what would that mean? What would that look like? How would we feel about that? So try to put yourself into, if you would have achieved this goal in a certain extent, what would that make with you? So you can challenge your goal a little. And that's, I think, some of the aspects I've seen, like dealing with goals and objectives. And no matter whether you use OKRs or whatever frameworks, at the end of the day, it's always these few things. And I spend a lot of time in university with the students to like help them understand these basic things, because I really see a struggle. One last point to add to this, coming back to expectations. I think this is the underestimated emotional part of defining goals. What are your goals as a company? What do you want to present to your team? But what are really your expectations? And it's so important to talk about expectations from different angles. Like, what are my expectations? What are your expectations? Because sometimes I define these goals, but my expectations are totally different. So maybe even if we would achieve these goals, I'm not happy because someone negotiated them down, the second, and this emotional layer is like, talk about expectations. Okay, let's define these goals, but actually I would expect more. Or this is way above my expectation, or I don't even expect that we do this, but let's define it as a goal. So try to also put your emotional things on the table, so you at least talked about it. And then also ask other people in the room, what would you expect? Because mostly it's like two people in the room decide about the goals, and the rest of people are interesting and saying, okay, let's go away with it. Let's try it out.
You just see that like whatever care enough, really.
So I think as a leader, you should also ask people, what do you expect? Like, what do you do if you see these goals? What are your expectations? And it's like,
and do you then like go back on it? Like, do you also make it part of the reflection once, let's say, the deadline of the goals are there, to say, hey,
It's so difficult to find enough time or make enough time to deal with all these topics. I think it's so important, but we were always in N26 very solid in defining the objectives. Like from the beginning, we were always like lagging way behind, doing this way too late. The quarterly goals were done once like we were mid of the quarter already. We got better in this, but we were not so good in reflecting on them. Because we are already stressed to define the next goals. So I think at the end of the day, you need to also put aside the perfectionist here and say, okay, you cannot be perfect. But the process, it's more about the process of this than the end result of, did you perfectly reflect on everything? Did you have everything documented? It's more about the thinking process, the communication process. Even though you might not perfectly reflect on each of the goals and do the grading every week, at least if you have some goals defined, this will be already 5 times better than having no goals or having unclear goals or having not meaningful ones. So I think in a startup world, you make a lot of compromises, and I can see this. Like, currently in Flash, we don't have clear goals. I try to do this a little for product team to give them a bit more guidance, but you make compromises. As you move on, you see that because in the family stage, in a small team, goals are very, you don't even need to speak about goals. People feel what is the goal. Like everyone knows it. So goals become more and more important the bigger your company will become. So you can have, it's because it's a tool to align people.
Yeah, it's a tool for conversation as well, right? Like one more thing to leave with. Like, if we think about, like, because some of the stuff we talk about is like universal for a long time, right? Is that in the 60s and 70s, a lot of these theories sort of like came out. In the 80s and 90s, they became popular. And now we're kind of like putting a slightly different spin on a lot of things. Like, how do you see, for example, 10 years from now, work look like for people? We see upcoming of like, people want to have like holacracy or autonomous or remote work. But where do you fundamentally actually think that the real meaningful change is going to be?
I think I do agree that like a lot of people thought on all of these things probably even 200 years ago.
Yes, business has been around before Amazon.
We just phrase it a bit differently. But I think the one change that actually happened is the pace of change or speed of change is like got way faster. Things that took 10 years, 50 years ago or a decade ago are taking now 1 year. Like, things are moving way, way faster. And that's why adaptability became so important. It's actually the key advantage of every company. If you cannot adapt, you will die. And if you look into why humans are being the most successful kind of species on Earth, it's because we are the most adaptable ones. Like every one of us is an experiment of the nature. And this is why nature is experimenting a lot with us to figure out, okay, how can we make this thing better?
Bend or break.
Yeah. And that's why I believe it's all about creating environments that foster experimentation. We can maximize the number of experiments that you can run. And this requires adaptability, obviously. This requires on working in a senseful way with data, like qualitative data, quantitative data, but still having also an informed opinion. I think it's becoming more and more important. If you look in big organizations today, it's super opinionated. It's like the highest paid person in the room is taking the decisions usually.
The hippo. Hippo in the room.
So I think startups are somewhat already a little bit in the future, you could say. Like what we do here, it will be, I think, true for a lot of companies, bigger companies as well. So when I talk with executives of corporates, like for them, it's like, what the fuck are you doing? So I think I see the future of first a company needs to focus on experimentation. Like how can we build an environment that can allow a lot of experimentation, that understands what does it mean to experiment, how do I measure experiments, how do I take good decisions out of certain experiments, and with this find a certain way and always disrupt myself. Not being afraid of like continuously changing and disrupting my own business model. This is a big challenge for companies that they become relying so much on their core business model that they are afraid of disrupting themselves, and then eventually it will lead
somebody
to
will
die.
do.
They will
if your
die
moat
at some
is big
point.
enough,
so
they will
just
try.
wait for some time. So it's like not being afraid of like permanently disrupting even your organizational setup. That's the one aspect, and the second aspect is the way of how people work. Obviously, I think people want flexibility, as what we can all feel. I think like being self-empowered to not just take decisions, but also like how to decide how we want to work, where we want to work, when we want to work. But the big challenge will be, how do you coordinate a group of people that wants to have a lot of
all make their own decisions.
Exactly. They all want to be empowered, and how do you coordinate this bunch of people? And there are interesting concepts. Like I heard that many people stopped using holacracy because it didn't work out for them. So I think and that brings me back to experimentation, we need to experiment with organization and figure out how can we structure our organizations in a way that it will allow this flexibility for people, that they kind of can find their self-fulfillment to a certain extent, because at the end more and more things being automated, so jobs which foster creativity will be more important, and in creativity is obviously involving a lot of flexibility and freedom and so on, etc. So I think it's also about experimentation on your organization, and that's why I think you in a company that's growing, you need someone being responsible for organizational development and organizational experiments. And
that's a good one. Yeah.
And people need to be aware that the company will permanently change all the time, and they should stop complaining about new processes and should stop complaining about, oh, now we changed this thing, and say, okay, this was an experiment that failed. And say, okay, now we try a new experiment, it's a new process, and maybe it will fail. Or maybe it will work for 3 months, but then we're gonna need something else.
Yes.
And that's quite important. And last point, I believe in ecosystems or loosely connected small units of delivery. Like if you look at your body, it's also a lot of organs that are relatively independent from each other. Okay, they have a brain that is somehow steering, and you need a kind of brain as a kind of, the leadership team needs to be somewhat the brain, but you need a lot of independent units that can move, that can recover, that can also somewhat experiment and grow. And maybe at some point, some units of that will not work out to be so successful. And like creating such an ecosystem more than just one monster of a company where everything is perfectly laid out and you have this perfect structure. So I'm inspired a lot by companies like Facebook that run thousands, tens of thousands of experiments every week, or Skyscanner, or also like Pinterest. They're big companies, but very different than the corporates. And I think that's what we miss in Europe, to be honest. I think we need more of such companies that come up with new models of new types of work.
Yeah. More experimentation, organizational experimentation. I like it. Thank you so much for your time, Markus.
Thank you for having me. It was also good, again, to reflect on all these
things.
Yeah,
definitely. Like I saw the reflection happening in real time, so it's great to be part of that.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to the Blindfeed podcast. We hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as we did. Subscribe to our future episodes, and please share with us your thoughts or questions or any of the insights that you might have to community@blindfeed.com. Bye-bye.